Okay, let's quickly compare the textual stability of the Mishnah compared to the New Testament. So, first of all, the overall agreement of manuscripts. The Mishnah has approximately 90 to 95% agreement across manuscripts. The New Testament has more variance than words. There are, depending on the different counts, 300,000 to 400,000 variants of the New Testament, whereas you have 140,000 words in the New Testament, roughly. So the dominant variant type in the Mishnah is orthographic, which means the spelling differences. And that's interesting because it was an oral tradition that got written down. So that's kind of actually expected. In the New Testament, it's orthographic for about 70% of the 300 to 400,000. And but there's also significant remainder of those of 30% doctrinal differences and things like that. So whole passages in doubt. So there's none in the Mishnah. There is a division difference, which is structural. So a long time ago, Makot used to be, I believe, part of Sanhedrin, but they made a division. So now Makot is separate from Sanhedrin. But for the New Testament, you have a whole bunch of different things. You've got endings of books that are found in one manuscript and not in another, all kinds of full sections and all sorts of things like that. The story of the woman committed adultery and they're going to stone her and stuff like that. Just all kinds of stuff. It's so hodgepodge. Okay, fabricated content that was inserted. Okay, so the Mishnah, nothing is known. There's no known insertions. For the New Testament, again, there's various proof texts that were fabricated and inserted, like 1 John 5, 7 through 8 and stuff like that. Doctrinal passages that were altered. So for the Mishnah, it wouldn't necessarily be doctrinal, but it would be halakhic, right? This is what we like. No halakhic rulings change across manuscripts. But for the New Testament, the Christological differences or variants affect core theological claims. So there are doctrinal passages that were altered. Okay, so textual and text families. So you have the Babylonian and Palestinian. So it's spanning a pretty decent geographic area. So the New Testament, you have the Alexandrian, the Western, the Byzantine, and the Caesarean, reflecting different scribal communities. Transmission quality. The Mishnah, you have professional Tanaim, who are people who memorize the text. So academic institutions, community of daily legal practice. Whereas the New Testament, you have individual scribes copying in a scriptoria without centralized oversight until the 4th century. So the Mishnah's textual stability is extraordinary, given the oral transmission history, but I guess that's kind of expected. And then the New Testament's textual instability is extraordinary, given that it was written from the start. So a text designated for memorization achieved greater stability than a text designated for writing. This tells us something about the institutional frameworks behind the traditions. And you also have to ask the question, if the New Testament was the Word of God that was being transmitted all over the world, why was it only found in Egypt for the first 4 centuries of Christianity? And why are there so many variants? Like, most people don't understand this, but like the King James Bible, it was translated from the Textus Receptus. There's no manuscript that's the Textus Receptus. There's like historical, right? It was the Textus Receptus is a couple scholars in the, I don't know what year it was, but quite some centuries back. They basically were going through different manuscripts and trying to pick out what they felt was the most appropriate, the best quality, well, maybe not best quality, but the best variants of these different manuscripts, and trying to make a full text of that. So that's what they call the Textus Receptus. So there's really no manuscript out there, like historical manuscript, that is the Textus Receptus. It's basically a lie. And then even today, whenever they print a Textus Receptus, they don't print the Textus Receptus. Typically, it's like with modifications, even on top of that. And It's funny because the very first Bibles, Christian Bibles, are Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. I'm not sure about Codex the Vaticanus, but I know that it's stated scholarly that the Codex Sinaiticus is one of the most edited, corrected texts in Christianity, in Christian history, New Testament text. It's one of the oldest, but they say that it has layers of corrections through generations and generations. It just was kept being corrected over time. So, was it really the word of? I don't think so.